Hey there, Belema Grand again. I'm really proud of you that you stayed on this far, and I hope you've been able to learn a few things, a lot actually, I hope. So we started off by walking you through a basic macro, which was basically to just record an activity or task and have it replicate or perform that same action again. And now we've been able to learn about control structures as well as variables which would help us manipulate all of these things. An important bit to also understand is that within the context of the Visual Basic application, we're working with the Microsoft Excel. So Microsoft Excel has objects. In the link that is being shared with the description of this video, you would see a resource to the Microsoft official center of learning, on how they define certain concepts that are really important. One of such concepts is the word object. The Visual Basic is an object-oriented programming language. So in essence, object-oriented. So it works with objects in mind. So objects are parts of an application. That's a way to put it. Okay, say a robot or a computer, a system, you have parts, an application, parts of it, and each part, it's an object. If that makes sense to you, it's an object, and each object, just if you think of it as a part, has some attributes or properties, or you could even call it characteristics. So, for instance, a popular one would be if we're using the computer to say, I don't know the color of your computer, all right? Perhaps yours is black, like mine. Is your computer black? Does your computer have a screen? That's a characteristic. That's a property, and that's something that you would use a lot when you're actually writing your logic, giving the models that we have written all of this time. We've just been writing control structures using variables. When you want to combine it with the Microsoft Excel object itself, okay, which is like a worksheet. So you recall our last bit where we declared a variable as a worksheet. Now, if I should just jump back into this sheet, I have sheet one. So I just created sheet one in here. Now, how do we interact the with this worksheet to let Excel know that, oh, I want to do something in sheet? You already know that a collection of sheets is a range. So you could also interpret a single cell as a range, and cell location. So let me just jump back in here and write another sub, okay, and say pop value. That's also what I'm going to call this sub, pop value, right? I'm going to scroll down in here, and what I want to just do here is to have in cell C3, okay. I could just leave it as cell C3. Now this is an object, right? Cell C3, and the dot is how you make reference to a property or a characteristic. So there are different IntelliSense is already popping up things, and I'm just saying value. So pop value, and I can just go with that, and I say equal to, and I want to pass a value to it, okay, and I could just say your new value in here, all right. And if I were to run this and go switch back to that sheet, now we have a value in here saying your new value. Now if we have to do same for C4, okay, so let's just include this with C4, and typically you would want to write this with your colon, right, and just say C. Perhaps I should just add C5, and I run this too. You can see, so this is just one way of working with Excel objects, okay. So a range is an object, the value is a property of the range object, okay. So with the range object, how it operates, you need to study that. You just need to read that up, basically. I won't say look up the range object, it's to look up objects within the Microsoft Excel application, okay. how you get to interact with workbooks, how you interact with worksheets, how you interact with cells or ranges such as this, and to also read up on their properties. That way you can properly apply the logic which you have in mind. So logic here would refer to these are conditional statements that we've written in our previous sessions, the loop, all of this put together, to help achieve your desired outcome. That is what would help you come up with a proper program, all right? A proper program or a proper application that would perform your personalized tasks. And this really is where I have always hoped to get you to, all right? From not knowing any bit of this to knowing the part of, okay, so this is what I want to use the VBA to do. Now this is where you now have to now search. Okay, so I want this to be dynamic. I don't want it to be static, such as C3 to C5. Here you can also apply logic, combine what we had talked about with our conditional statements, with our loop statements. These things it also would show you how you can achieve a proper application. The last bit would be with user forms. Okay, so lastly, another thing you could also do is to have forms, right? User forms. I know in our very earlier sessions we talked about using normal forms within the Excel application, not as a macro enabled workbook. But however, you could have some more customizable user forms, and in here you just have insert user form and you select user form, and it comes with the toolbox, which typically gives you different form input. Perhaps you could be familiar with things like Google Forms. Just similarly, so you have a label, you have a text box, you have buttons here, and other things that you could just, use for that. So I'm just going to just input a basic text box in here and just say type in, let's say type in your name, and I'm just going to come in here to change the foreground color to an inactive disabled text, because I typically just want it to serve as a placeholder. I come out of it and I want a label for it. So I could just come in here and click in to say your name, right? So your name, I just have that in here. And next I want the button. Okay, so it's a button option. You could just say the button text should be submit. All right, submit. Now this form is user form 8. Okay, user form 8, and I have this all done here. Now that form is not going to be displayed unless you call it. Okay, so this form 8. So I'm just going to, so unless you call it, so to call it is simply to mention the form user form 8 dot. Now that's on, because it's a form, right? It's a property. So it's a property of an object here. So I say show and I run. So now when I run, you can see it in here. And now the person can just go in there and type in their name and hit submit. This button doesn't do anything, so it doesn't really direct you to anywhere. But the goal of this is just to let you know that there are all this area of options, things you could do with this, the forms, writing, if you were to come back to your normal code base to write an elaborate program, you now know what it takes, right? You know the different types of variables in terms of data types, which we covered. You know the control structure, which speaks to the conditional. So we talk about the if, the assignments you did on switch statements, the loops, the for loops, the for each loop, the while loop, do while loops, you name it. Everything we've covered up until this point is the required basics for you to be able to write your own program using VBA application to perform customized tasks just for you. You're welcome. All right. If there are any questions, you run into issues, the channel is always open. You can always drop your questions, places where you need more clarity. I'll be happy to help. If I'm slow to responding to you, I'm sure some other persons will. Till then, bye for now.